Hi, and welcome to The Brew. I'm Charlotte Bain. The way we feed our dogs is one of the most consistent ways we care for them. It's one of the clearest expressions of love, but it's also an area that's filled with so much confusion and really strong opinions and a lot of marketing. And that's why I wanted to have my guest on today, Dr. Gary Richter. He's a veterinarian, an author, and one of the leading voices in integrative pet health. Today we talk about what really matters when it comes to nutrition, how to cut through the noise, and the small choices that we can make that will create a meaningful difference in your dog's long-term health and his well-being. So let's just jump into this chat. Hi, Dr. Richter. It's so lovely to have you on the podcast this time. I tried to get you on a few years ago when I started this podcast. I think it was around like 2022 or 23, but I think you were deep into launching your last book, which was Longevity for Dogs, and you were super busy, so we weren't able to do it. So I'm excited to have you on today.
Glad we made it work.
I'm glad we made it work. Yeah, per Dr. Heather. She's always so great. She's the best.
Yeah.
So I wanted to jump in with you because when people ask me, or when they're thinking about nutrition for their dog, oftentimes they ask, what brand of dog food do you feed your dog, right? I think that's the first thing that people think of when they think about nutrition for their dogs. And then if their dogs have some sort of issue, maybe allergies or something pre-existing, then they often ask a little bit deeper into ingredients. But my question for you is, from your perspective, since we're really focusing on the human-animal bond, what role does nutrition really play in the dog's overall wellness and their overall well-being? Meaning, how much does food shape not only their physical health, but their quality of life?
Sure. It's a great question. You know, you mentioned a minute ago the books I wrote a few years ago, Longevity for Dogs and Longevity for Cats. And, you know, I spend the first roughly third of those books discussing kind of the cornerstone of longevity in animals, and this translates to people as well. And really what that comes down to is three things: diet, exercise, and lifestyle. You can talk all day long about all of the various things that are going to help you or your pet live longer, all kinds of fancy things, supplements, peptides, regenerative medicine, what have you.
Sure.
If you don't have diet, exercise, and lifestyle sorted out, none of it means anything. So to your question, nutrition is everything. It is the ground floor of health and longevity. So, I mean, truthfully, you know, I think you're correct in the sense that people ask what brand of food should I feed, but I think really the question that they should be asking is, what kind of food should I feed? I think that's the more appropriate question.
I think that, you know, for humans, we've kind of got that locked down. We all know that we should be eating more fruits and vegetables. We should be eating, you know, less carbs, more protein, perhaps, and all of those things. But where do you think the disconnect is a little bit, for not for everyone, but for
Yeah.
humans and pets? Because oftentimes, you know, it doesn't even occur to clients of mine, you know, that perhaps they should be, there are simple steps that they can take to improve their dog's bowl.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I very much appreciate the way you sort of presented that, in the sense of, like, in humans we kind of have this lockdown, and like we do and we don't.
Hopefully.
We do and we don't.
Right.
Like, we all know that the more fresh whole food we eat and the less processed food we eat, the better.
Yeah.
But yet many of us don't live that lifestyle.
True.
So it's like, we know, but we don't know. It's like, you know, everybody that smokes cigarettes knows what those things will do to you.
Right.
But they do it anyway.
Right. Yeah, I do personally have a potato chip problem, so I will say that.
Everybody's got their weak
Not
spot.
a problem, but it's definitely a weak spot.
Everybody's got their weak spot. So the way that I often sort of present this topic to people when it comes to their pets is, think about the body, your pet's body, your own body, as a biological machine. And like any other machine, your body is designed to run on a certain type of fuel. So if I look at my car is designed to run on a certain type of gas and a certain type of oil and all kinds of various other fluids that have to go into a car to make it run. And it's all very specified.
Right.
And, can you put the wrong kind of gas in a car and have it run? You can, but it's not going to run very well. And there's a pretty good chance at some point the car's going to break,
Right.
because it's not being used in the way that it should. Now, the good news for all of us is a biological machine is a lot more forgiving than a mechanical one. If I put diesel fuel in my unleaded car, it's not going to be too long before that engine doesn't run anymore. It's amazing how long people and animals can live eating junk food, and that biology somehow manages to make it work.
Right.
But if we're talking about optimizing nutrition, if we're talking about optimizing health span and lifespan, then we got to have a different conversation than like what's adequate, what's going to get by. So, again, looking at this biological machine was designed to run on certain nutrients as a function of evolution.
Hmm.
Humans evolved eating, and the body then learned how to thrive on a certain spectrum of nutrients, as is the case with every other animal on the planet. An ideal nutritional spectrum for a person is a little different than a dog. It's a lot different than a cat.
Sure. Yeah.
So really, what we're looking at doing is approximating what that particular body, whatever body it is optimized to function on. So number one, no animal evolved eating food out of a bag or a can. So we're not designed to eat processed food. Processed food has all kinds of issues with it that cause problems. So you mentioned a little bit when it comes to dry food or kibble, it's an enormous amount of carbohydrates. The
Sure.
dry food is usually somewhere plus or minus 60% carbohydrates. Now, dogs are certainly able to utilize carbohydrates. Um, Usually somewhere they're kind of optimized for maybe around 15% plus or minus
Okay.
carbohydrates in their diet. Certainly not 60 or 70%. Cats are obligate carnivores. So legitimately their bodies have no use for carbs whatsoever. And yet a lot of cats are eating dry food,
Right.
eating 60% carbohydrates.
Right.
We all know what happens to our bodies as humans when we eat too many carbohydrates. And our bodies are far more adapted for carbs than dogs or cats are.
Right.
So now you're going to wind up with things like weight gain, inflammation, gastrointestinal problems, dysbiosis. You can go on and on about what these high carb loads are going to do. And you also have the problems with highly processed food that they are created in such a way that nutrients are lost in the processing, that compounds like advanced glycated end products, Maillard product reactants are created. We know from the research that these products create inflammation and cause cancer.
And what specifically are those? Those are big words that I just want to make sure people know what those,
Sure. So
like
when you
glyphosates, is that kind of like the same?
glyphosate is
Or
a
glyphosate, yeah.
that's a whole nother
Okay.
problem.
Well, we don't.
Glyphosate's an herbicide.
I see.
It's
Okay,
a
yeah.
weed killer.
Right,
Um,
right, 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 right.
so because crops that are fed to cattle are sprayed with glyphosate, and then the
Mhm.
cattle eat the crops with the glyphosate, it winds up in their tissues, and then it winds up in the tissues of whoever's eating that
Right.
product, and
Okay.
that goes for people as well if you're a
Yeah.
meat eater. Um, the what I'm talking about is when you take, because somewhere in its early history, if we look at what goes into kibble, it's fresh ingredients at some point, right?
Sure.
um and then these ingredients get cooked at very high temperatures and very high pressures, and chemical products get created when things like proteins and carbohydrates are under those kinds of temperatures and pressures, and you wind up with these molecules called advanced glycated end products or Maillard product reactants. The Maillard reaction is it's kind of a very well-known product. It's the reason why people like things like grilled meat. So like
I see. Yeah.
when you char proteins and carbohydrates and you get that really yummy, like kind of burned barbecue sort of flavor that everybody
Yeah.
really likes. Sadly, that stuff will kill you.
Mhm.
We know that those compounds are really bad for you. Similarly, advanced glycated end products, there's not really as easy of a sort of corollary to discuss there, like
Yeah.
burnt meat, but nonetheless, the research is very, very clear that these chemical compounds that are just part of the processing are pro-inflammatory and pro-cancer. You won't see advanced glycated end products on an ingredients list because it's not an ingredient. It's a byproduct that just happens when these things are processed in
I see.
the way that they are. Every pet food company in the world knows that these compounds are in these foods. They're just not going to talk about it because
Right.
it's convenient marketing for them.
Right.
So those are some of the problems that happen with eating processed food. It's the same thing with us as people. When you're eating highly processed food, those are some of the things that you're consuming and that are really bad for your body. So
Right.
coming back to your original question of like what should people feed, what we want to feed is a diet that is optimized to whatever this particular biological machine is designed to run on, which is always fresh whole foods.
Mhm.
Now, the specific nutrient profile, like I say, it's going to be different for a cat versus a dog.
Mhm.
Dogs are a little more carb tolerant than cats are,
Mhm.
although dogs don't really need carbohydrates in their diet from a biological standpoint.
Right.
So there's a lot of different fresh food options out there. There's things that you can buy. There's lightly cooked food. There's raw food.
Mhm.
There's freeze dried food. People can also make food for their
Mhm.
pets if they are so inclined and have the time to do it. The one caveat with making food is that it's very, very important that people work off of a properly balanced recipe. So
Right.
we know that these animals are getting all of the nutrients they need. You cannot just put meat and vegetables in a bowl and call it good.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way. And
Calcium is an issue, correct? When you're
calcium's a huge
creating
issue.
your
So
own dog. Yeah.
that's the perfect example
Yeah.
of people put meat and vegetables in a bowl and they think they're doing a great job. And my
Right.
first question to those people is always, where's their calcium coming from? And
Right.
then you get the blank stare.
Right.
The other thing that people will often say is, well, every meal that I eat is not perfectly balanced. Why does it matter for my dog or my
Mhm.
cat? It's a great question. And the answer lies in the fact that we as people, we tend to eat a wide variety of food. So while it may be that every meal that you eat is not perfectly balanced, Lord knows that's certainly true for me,
Yeah.
but the hope is that in the aggregate, you're getting everything that you need over
Right.
time. Because our dogs and our cats have a tendency to eat the same thing every day in the long
Mhm.
term, if there's something missing from that diet, that deficiency is going to amplify over time. And while it may not be that your dog's going to get, say, like rickets from a vitamin D deficiency, we also, just to use vitamin D as an example, we also know that vitamin D plays a very, very important role in immune surveillance and cancer prevention.
Mhm.
So your dog's chronic vitamin D deficiency could lead it to get cancer later. And these are the things that we're trying to prevent with
Right.
appropriate diet.
Right. And in addition, we've also there's been some research done, at least in humans, with like the gut brain connection, right? So, and the same is true for our pets.
Oh,
How
for
does
sure.
like the poor nutrition contribute to your thoughts on like anxiety and perhaps reactivity or, low energy,
Yeah.
things like that?
That's an outstanding question. So, for people that are not aware of it, the gut microbiome is an incredibly critical piece of overall health.
Yeah.
Approximately 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. If your gut's not happy, your body's not happy. And if you doubt that, find somebody that has IBS or Crohn's disease and see if
Hmm.
they're a happy person. Uh,
Right.
that's a really, really tough kind of hand to have to be dealt because it just affects the body in so many ways. So there's this thing, as you mentioned, called the gut brain axis, which basically means that things that are happening in the gut are affecting and changing what's happening in the brain and vice versa. So for example, the bulk of our body's serotonin is produced in the gut by gut bacteria. Serotonin, if you're not aware of it, is one of those chemicals that helps us feel calm and happy and not stressed out.
I didn't know that it was produced in the gut. That's
Yeah, a lot
new
of it's
news to
produced in
me,
the
which
gut.
makes
So
sense. Yeah.
yeah, so the entire class of pharmaceuticals, the SSRIs, drugs like Prozac, what have you, the whole purpose of those drugs is to increase the amount of serotonin in the central nervous system.
Hmm.
I'm not suggesting that anybody that's on one of those medications can fix everything with diet. But what
Right.
I am saying is that there's a lot of connection here. When you look at studies that have evaluated things like Alzheimer's disease, there has been a direct link to gut issues with Alzheimer's disease. That's not
Hmm.
to say that Alzheimer's is completely controlled by gut health, but there is a connection there.
Hmm.
So people just need to understand that when you're putting the wrong food in your pet or yourself, not only is it about sort of the nutrition that you're getting, but it's about the bacteria that you're feeding in the
Hmm.
gut. And if you're feeding the wrong bacteria, so for example, if you're putting way too many carbohydrates in the system, you may be promoting populations of pathogenic bacteria that while they may or may not be causing gut issues, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, they may be causing more global issues within the body that you're not even aware of.
Hmm.
Inflammation, cognitive issues, what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are for like, let's start with this. What change when you witness someone start to feed their dog a healthier diet? What are some of the changes that you can see that one can look for? You've touched on it a little bit, but just to give someone a little bit of encouragement, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are things that frequently people will see in fairly short order. So for starters, I mean, I can't tell you how many people over the years I've had come into my office where the pet has had chronic gastrointestinal issues,
Hmm.
chronic skin related problems. And people, my office, as you're probably aware, we do a lot of integrative medicine,
Hmm.
and we have a tendency to either be people's first stop or their last.
Yeah.
So either they're super proactive as far as integrative medicine goes and we're their veterinarian, or they've been to every specialist they can find, haven't gotten resolution, and we're like their last hope.
Yeah.
So, people come in, they've been to internal medicine, they've had God knows how many thousands of dollars worth of diagnostic work, or they've been to dermatology and the same thing has happened and they've just not gotten any relief. And not every time, but sometimes you put these pets on an appropriate, fresh, whole food diet, and within a matter of weeks, things dramatically change. The diarrhea stops, the vomiting stops, the dull, sort of dry hair coat suddenly looks
Hmm.
shiny and hair starts coming back in. Pets get less itchy. And it always makes me chuckle a little bit when these kinds of things happen, that suddenly that pet owner thinks I'm a genius,
Yeah.
when in reality, I mean, to me, what I offered was the lowest of low hanging fruit. Like, let's improve your pet's nutrition.
Hmm.
Like, this was not Nobel Prize winning science that
Right.
that we just flexed here.
Right.
It's it's quite frankly what every pet owner and what every veterinarian should be thinking of as the ground floor of restoring health anyway, but sadly we don't.
Right. And I think, if you're the last stop, they've been to several veterinarians who aren't offering that as a solution or even a
Yeah,
first step. So
sure.
that's where the disconnect there is, or, you
Mhm.
know. So
Yeah, for sure.
can we talk about aging dogs? I recently lost my boy Chance, who was almost 18 when he
Well done.
passed. Yes, thank you. He came into my life at about 9 months old, and he had all sorts of, gastrointestinal issues and allergies and all sorts of things. And in the beginning, we tried like the best kibbles and all of those things for like a year and a half until
Yeah.
someone suggested trying, and nothing was working. He was even hospitalized a couple times with I think it's called HGE, where
Ugh, that's no
it
fun.
was very, very scary.
Yeah.
And so we switched to a raw food diet
Mhm.
when he was around 2, saw
Yeah,
dramatic improvement, and he was on that until he was about 11, and he just kind of didn't want it anymore. Like, I tried shifting the flavors, the
yeah,
protein and all the things. He just
yeah,
didn't want it, didn't like the texture, he didn't like anything. So we switched to a lightly cooked diet, and
yeah,
he was on that for the remaining of his years.
sure.
So can we talk a little bit about like appropriate, like how feeding our fresh foods and how being mindful as your dog ages on maybe some of the changing needs that can help the aging process, help move the aging process or slow the aging process.
Sure. So, I mean, you bring up a really interesting point in the sense of there is no one diet
Yeah.
that dogs should be on. I mean, all medicine should be personalized, individualized medicine. And it's not at all uncommon as people or animals get older that their digestive system works a little bit differently. Raw food, by definition, takes more metabolic energy to digest than cooked food.
Hmm.
I once had an acupuncturist who told me that honestly, like, if you really wanted to eat what your body wants, you would just eat soup
That's
because
what I was
that's
gonna
essentially
say.
what your body has to turn it into anyway
Yeah.
in
And you
order
think
to
about
digest it.
aging humans, we often automatically start just wanting soup.
Yeah, right? Because like your body basically has to
Yeah.
cook and liquefy everything before you can assimilate those nutrients anyhow. So like as pets get older, sometimes raw food just it's a lot for them
Yeah.
to have to digest. And if they're not digesting it well and undigested food is getting into their intestines, then they're going to wind up with a tummy ache and they're not going to want to eat. They're not
Hmm.
going to like it.
Yeah.
Suddenly you put them on something that's cooked, so it
Hmm.
takes less work for them to deal with and they're happier. So
Hmm.
that's great that you made that shift. So, as I mentioned earlier, from the standpoint of health and longevity, you know, diet, exercise, and lifestyle are really the cornerstone of all of this. And you can't expect to have your pet live its longest, best life if you don't have those boxes checked. And clearly you did something right because your dog made it to 18.
He had
Uh,
all those boxes checked, yeah. He was
yeah,
my
and
business partner, yeah. He had tons of
yeah,
friends, tons of walking, yeah.
yeah, and that's really what needs to be done. Now, the reality is, biology sort of is what it is, and I think, the maybe the metaphor of comparing, a biological machine to a mechanical one,
Sure.
it sort of falls apart a little bit when we get into aging because, so theoretically speaking, if I replaced parts on my car as they wore out, my car will run indefinitely.
Mhm.
As long as I just keep fixing the stuff that breaks, then
Right,
it'll run forever.
right.
Um, a biological machine has has programming in it that doesn't allow that to happen. So like this aging process, it's something that quite frankly science is really only just beginning to really get a grip on.
Mhm.
And that's, I mean, if that's a conversation we can have about sort of the science of aging and longevity and things of that nature, because that is an absolutely fascinating field.
Yeah.
But as has been explained to me by multiple people in the longevity science field, if you expect as a human to live to be 125 years old and you think you're going to do that with diet, exercise, and lifestyle alone, you got another thing coming.
Right.
Because you're fighting against this biological programming of aging.
Mhm.
Now, we can slow that process through, appropriate nutrition and exercise and lifestyle and supplements and things of that nature. We can also speed that process up artificially by feeding the wrong things and creating undue stress. Or like, you take a human as a, for example, and if somebody is obese and a chain smoker, you're speeding that person's aging process up
Right,
by stressing the body in that way. So we can
right.
speed it up, we can slow it down, but you're not going to profoundly slow it or stop it without the aid of technology and modern science.
I see.
You just can't do it. I mean, like, you think about it this way, with the exception of the everybody that's alive right now, every single person that's ever been alive in the world is dead. There's a reason for that. Nobody's cracked that code yet. And the
It's
and the
true.
interesting thing is it's our generation that's probably going to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the science is bananas right now, what
Right.
what is being looked at. Like, it is absolutely not unreasonable to think that people our age are going to live to 125 plus.
Right.
It is
Right.
not out of the realm of reality.
We had on previous seasons of the podcast, we had the leap years
Sure.
scientists on
I know
to
Nick.
discuss.
Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
good guy.
So that Chance, my dog Chance, was on leap years for
As are mine.
yeah, the last and I saw a significant change. Whether do you want to touch on what that technology was, just so people can? It's
Yeah,
like I can't
sure.
remember the name of it. We should be
Yeah,
taking it too,
so
apparently. Yeah.
So Leap Years is a product that was created. The head of the company, his name is Nick Sinclair. Nick's brother is a guy by the name of David Sinclair.
Hmm.
David is a very, very well-known longevity researcher at Harvard. You look up Nick Sinclair and you're going to have plenty of reading material to keep you busy for a while.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Leap Years is kind of built on a lot of the technology that David has created. And really, so there's multiple ways to approach longevity, but the way that Leap Years does it is there's two sort of basic processes in the body. One of them is called AMPK. One of them is called mTOR. It's not really
Mhm.
important to get into the weeds of
Okay.
what all
Yeah.
of that means, but the long story short is that, from a systems repair perspective, the body has to do two things. It has to be able to create new tissue. Like
Mhm.
when something gets injured or damaged, we have to be able to fix it. But when there's injured or damaged or aging cells or tissue, we also have to be able to get rid of the old. So
Mhm.
it's out with the old, in with the new. So think
I see.
about like if you were going to renovate a house, you can bring in all the new building materials, the wiring, the drywall, the plumbing, what have you. Before you do that, you have to get all the old crap out. You can't just
Right.
put the new drywall on top of the old drywall. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So the body has this balance of I have to build it up, I have to break it down,
Right.
in order to kind of maintain a balance. So that's what leap years is basically leveraging. So as you know, because you've used it, the way these supplements work is most of the month you're giving one supplement. And
Right.
then for a few days during the month, you give a different supplement.
Right.
So the difference between the two is for 2 or 3 days a month, you're giving a supplement that is encouraging the body to do a process called autophagy. And what autophagy means is that that's the cleanup. So that's cells in the body saying, okay, that's damaged. Let's get rid of it. Let's
Right.
remove this cell, that cell. And you're promoting that autophagy process. The rest of the month, you're building tissue up. So you're building muscle, you're building bone, whatever you may be building. But
Right.
again, a few days every month, you got to let the body go in and pull the old stuff out so there's appropriate balance.
Right.
That's what Leap Years does. It's brilliant technology. I am a big
Yeah.
fan. Like I say, my
Me
dogs are
too.
on it.
Me
And
too.
I have two dogs at home. They are both lab mastiff crosses.
Oh my
So
gosh.
they're
Big
big
guys.
fellas. They're about
Yeah.
125 pounds a pop. One of them just turned 11 the
Oh
other day.
my gosh. That's amazing.
So he's not ancient, but sadly for a dog of his size,
Yeah.
he's getting there. So, we're doing everything we can in my house to kind of slow that process and, keep him a happy guy.
Yeah. The average lifespan, as we know it, for a dog that size is usually what, between like 8 and 10 years or something like
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So, if I'm going to keep my fiance happy and have the dog live to 30, I got some work to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Let me know if 30. Wow, that's pushing it, but who knows? Maybe soon,
Yeah.
maybe
We'll see what we can
eventually.
do.
We'll see what we can do. So let's talk about some tangible things because I think right now we're kind of pet parents and people in general are overwhelmed by everything that's coming at them. So when we
Hmm.
talk about food, I know a lot of folks are overwhelmed by, as I mentioned before, like the brands and then this and then that, and go, oh, or being shamed into you should only be doing this, you should only be doing that. I want some tangible steps for people who maybe are not ready, either financially or although you can do a fresh food diet that is economical as well.
Yeah.
But financially or just not on that page yet to move from their kibble into
Mhm.
a fresher food diet. What are some small steps they can take to improve their diet of their dog?
Sure.
And this is kind of a two-parter. Uh, And also, if they're, what are some things that your dog is showing you other than skin issues or digestive issues? What are maybe some small things that they might be telling you that you need to switch it up a little bit? Those are two very separate questions. So sorry, I
Okay,
lumped them
so
together.
those are big questions.
Yeah, I know.
So, okay, so let's start with the first one.
I got too excited there. Okay.
Yeah, right. So philosophically, like when I sit down with a pet owner and I
Yeah.
make recommendations, and whether this could be food, supplements, pharma, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. The thing that I always have to keep in mind is that whatever I'm recommending as a treatment plan, it has to be sustainable for
Yes.
that person. So for example, I can tell somebody, here's 17 supplements for your dog that I want you to give 4 times a day.
Right.
Nobody's going to do that.
No.
Or if I make a recommendation of, I want you to feed your dog. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
That's what happens when your mom rings through and when your phone's on do not disturb. Yeah. Sorry
Do you
about
need
that.
to get that? It's your mom.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Sorry, mom. Talk to her. I talked to her yesterday. I swear it's okay. Um, but anyway, so like, for example, if I tell somebody that I want them to feed their dog a raw food diet, but it's out of their price range and they can't
Sure.
do it,
Right.
again, it's not sustainable. If somebody's going to go home and do the thing for like a week and then they can't do it anymore, I
Right.
haven't done anybody any favors.
Right.
So this is the important thing, like any lifestyle change, whatever it may be, diet, supplements, meds, whatever, it has to be sustainable.
Right.
So what I would say to people is, perfect world, you're going to feed your dog a fresh whole food diet. And whether or not that diet should be raw, cooked, freeze dried, homemade, store bought, it's very individualized based on the pet's needs and the person. But if for whatever reason that is not doable, and
Yeah.
usually the reason is it's too much money,
Hmm.
or it takes too much time.
Sure.
What I will tell people is, look at it the way that we would look at our nutrition as a person. You know, every single bite of food that I have is not ideal.
Right.
I'd like to tell you that I only eat fresh whole foods that are perfectly balanced, but I'd
Sure.
be lying.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes I eat things that I shouldn't eat. You have a potato chip issue. Sometimes I eat foods that nutritionally speaking, aren't the greatest things in the world. But just because I do that, it doesn't mean that I should just throw it all away and say, well, I'm just going to eat junk food for the rest of my
Right.
life.
Right.
So the point to all of this is feed as much fresh food as you can,
Hmm.
and then feed the rest of it as, like the best quality kibble or the best quality canned that
Hmm.
you can do. Like you have to figure out what works both financially and logistically in your life that is going to be sustainable for you.
Yes.
Some kibble and some fresh food is way better than just kibble.
Hmm.
So that's really what it comes down to. Like very few of us, get to live in that perfect world. Like, I often tell people
Right.
like if every bite of food that I ate was perfectly balanced, fresh, whole food,
Right.
I would probably be an incredibly, incredibly healthier person than I am right now. Not to say
Right.
that I'm not healthy, but
Right.
the reality is I don't have Oprah's private chef kind of money.
Right. Right.
And very, very few of us do. So
Right.
you got to live in your real world. And so do our pets. So you do the best that you can
Right. You take
when
the
it comes
small
to that.
steps. Yeah.
Yeah. And then to your second question, what kind of things might you see that would give you an indication that there's a food issue? Sometimes it's obvious.
Hmm.
Chronic gastrointestinal issues or even intermittent gastrointestinal issues, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, skin and coat problems, dry skin, greasy skin, itchy skin, dull
Yeah.
hair coat, excessive shedding, things of this nature. Sometimes, quite frankly, it's not as obvious. There's
Yeah.
subtleties going on underneath that sometimes can be detected with diagnostic tests, with blood tests of that nature. Sometimes it's lower energy than they otherwise might have.
Right.
Sometimes it's a mood thing. Think about it this way. How would you know if your dog has a chronic low-grade tummy ache?
Right.
Like, how would you know? How would you know if your dog has a headache? You know, the thing about veterinary medicine is we're dealing with an entire population of nonverbal patients.
Right.
And not only are they nonverbal, but they will go out of their way to not tell you when something's wrong with them.
Right.
You know, an animal in the wild that looks sick or injured is going to be targeted by a predator.
Right.
And our pets maintain that hard wiring despite many, many thousands of years of domestication. So the tricky bit is like, that's the only time that your pet's going to lie to you is about their own health.
Right.
But the problem is what that means is that oftentimes by the time they look sick, they've been sick for a while.
Yep.
Uh, and then you wind up in this situation where medically speaking, you're behind the eight ball because now you're trying to treat something that if you'd been able to treat it months or weeks or years ago, you might have had a better chance of getting it resolved than you do today.
Yeah.
So the end result of that, to get back to your question, is sometimes you get an indication that there's a problem related to diet. And sometimes by the time you get that indication, it's too late to do anything about it.
Right.
So that's why proactive preventative medicine is really what we should all be practicing for both ourselves and our pets.
Right. I feel like that kind of leads into my next question, which is really, since we're focusing on like the human animal bond this season, how or can the way we nourish our pets deepen the bond that we have with them?
You know what? Well, clearly the answer to that is yes. And you know, I think in most cultures in the world, there is a facet of food is love.
Yes.
Like, like
Yeah.
I think you'd be hard pressed to find a culture where that's not a piece of it. You know, you know, my Jewish mom and my Jewish grandmother, boy, did they love to feed people.
Sure.
And I think it, you know, whatever culture you're from, it's the same. So yeah, I mean, and you know, there's like this inexorable link between food and feeding and eating and feeding other things that is an expression of our love and affection.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one of the ways that we show our love to our pets. You know, but of course, you know, our pets don't always have the sort of cognitive ability to understand what's, you know, what's ideal for them
Right.
nutritionally speaking, and thusly it's possible for us as pet owners with the best of intention to feed them the wrong thing. Once you have that understanding and that education of how important nutrition is, I mean, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, God knows how many hundreds of years ago, that said, "You are what you eat."
Yeah.
Mm, you know what? It's
I don't
I,
know. Was that Benjamin Franklin? I don't know.
you know,
Yeah,
the
maybe.
reality is that cliches are cliche for a reason. It's because
Right.
they're true.
Right.
They're annoying, but they're true, you know, and that's really what it comes down to is like, you want a healthy body, then feed that biological machine the fuel that it wants.
Right. Right. Well, that is a perfect closing statement, I think, right there. I so appreciate you. Do you have any final comments?
Uh, you know, I think the sort of final comment that I'll have, because we didn't maybe really touch on it, is, you know, like figuring out, you know, what food format in the fresh food format
Yeah.
should one eat
Right.
or one feed their pet, really. And like I say, some of it's about, you know, what's sustainable for you as a
Hmm.
person. You know, some animals will do better on raw versus cooked. I think it's important to realize, like, if you live in a house where there are small children or there's somebody who, for whatever reason, maybe is immune compromised, maybe raw food is not the
Hmm.
best choice. Properly made raw food these days, there's not that big of a pathogen concern,
Right.
but
But it grosses some people out also. I
it
have
grosses some
clients who just
people
won't
out.
do it. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
absolutely does. It grosses
Yeah.
some people out. But again, like if there's somebody in the house that, you know, they're on chemotherapy or they have
Sure.
autoimmune disease or whatever it may
Right.
be, like even if the chances are low, like that's not a risk that you
No.
wanna take.
No.
Um, and the other thing I'll throw out there just as a food format is I'm a real big fan of freeze dried.
Yes.
And the reason why I like freeze dried food is because it's processed at very, very low temperatures. It retains all of the nutrients that fresh food does,
Hmm.
but it also, along the way, it picks up a lot of the convenience of kibble in the
Yes.
sense of doesn't need to be refrigerated. Literally, all you have to do is pour it in a bowl and add a little bit of water. It's freeze dried, so it weighs nothing. So from the
Hmm.
standpoint of like, if you're going to travel with your dog, it's super easy to throw it in the car. You don't need a cooler. So there's all kinds of convenience and thus hopefully sustainability from a person's perspective that it's easier to do. I work with a company called Ultimate Pet Nutrition that we make
Hmm.
freeze dried foods. There's clearly many brands out there, but I think that that's a really, really good option for people who maybe feel like they don't want to get into dealing with like frozen raw food in their
Right.
freezer and their fridge and all of this. It's just too complicated. I think that's a really good way to go. But again, at the end of the day, this is all very individualized based on what your pet does best on. So you
Yeah.
just have to sort out what works best for your pet and for you.
I will say that most of my clients are now on a freeze-dried diet, and that's worked out really great for the majority of them.
Yeah,
Um,
agreed.
Here, I have a question about freeze-dried. When during the freeze-drying process, and a lot of it is freeze-dried raw is essentially what most freeze-dried. Is all freeze-dried food raw, or is it just?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the cook stuff, a lot of times that winds up being dehydrated
I
rather
see.
than
Yeah.
freeze dried, and
Yeah.
there is a specific difference between the two.
Right. So does the freeze-drying process help get rid of some of the potential pathogens, I guess is my question. If they're
So
Yeah,
yeah, that's a really excellent question. And while to an extent the answer to that question is yes, the
yeah.
way that the pathogens are really handled when fresh food is made properly is through a process called high pressure pasteurization or
Mhm,
HPP. Essentially what that means is you take raw food and it goes into a machine that puts it under enormous pressure. I can't remember the equivalent, but it's like tens of thousands of feet underwater kind of pressure.
okay.
And what happens under that pressure is it literally fractures bacteria. It
Mhm,
crushes them to death. But it does it at low temperature. So like nothing's getting cooked, nothing's changed from the standpoint of the nutritional value of the food,
right.
but you've destroyed the pathogens. And then what happens is that raw food then winds up getting freeze dried. So then you wind up with pathogen free food that's never been cooked. So that's the way that ideally speaking that gets done. And that is one other thing that I think it's important for people to realize. If you're going to make raw food at home, clearly that step's not going to happen. And pathogens are a much bigger concern if you're making raw food at home than if you're buying it from somebody that's doing HPP. So that is just something that you need to be aware of, both from a pet safety, but also a human safety perspective.
Right. That makes sense. Perfect sense. My last question for you is if what is one misconception about dog nutrition that you wish people would just let go of?
Oh God, it's hard to come up with one. Probably the one that irks me the most, and this more often than not comes from veterinarians,
Ah,
is that fresh food is neither safe nor nutritionally appropriate.
yeah, so
You
interesting
get
because it
that one a
doesn't make
lot.
any sense. Yeah.
No, it doesn't make any sense except when you realize where veterinarians are getting their nutritional education from.
Yes. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. This has been
Yeah,
a
it's my
great
pleasure.
conversation.
I got to call my mom.
Yeah, you gotta know. If you enjoyed this conversation, I'd love it if you'd follow the show, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who loves dogs. You can find links to everything we talked about today in the show notes, and I'd love to connect with you on Instagram at BaruPup. If you have a story you'd like to share, you can email me at charlotte@thebaru.com. Thanks for listening to The Baru, and let's chat soon.